All right, so we will be discussing COVID vaccinations today. I'm not going to go through all of the vaccinations that are available worldwide. We'll be discussing vaccinations in general, and then I will make specific references to the two vaccines that we do have available currently. That's the Pfizer vaccine. That's the one that's being rolled out currently, and then the Johnson and Johnson vaccine, which was the first phase of vaccination rollout that we had for healthcare workers earlier in the year. But generally, the the concepts apply to all vaccines, and I foresee that in the coming months we will also be receiving other vaccinations as well. So, for example, the Moderna one, Moderna, and then there's the Sputnik and the other ones as well. So, the companies that make them are different, and some of the technologies around them are a little bit different, but generally the concepts are the same, and the ideas and the effects that they have are generally the same. There will be some differences, but not differences that are so drastic that they're completely different and you would recommend one over the other. All right, good. So I think before we talk about vaccines, it's important just to understand the actual structure of the COVID virus or SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes coronavirus disease. So the picture on the left is if you look through a microscope, that's what you will see. So when they're analyzing your sputums and stuff, that's what you would see. You would see the virus under the electron microscope. And if you look at the right, that's just a better picture. You'll see that that's how it looks. And then if you cut that virus in half, then that's the inside part of it. So the inside, that squiggly part there, that's the DNA or the RNA, the genetic makeup of the virus. Then you have the capsule, like the protective layer. And then these pink structures that are sticking out, these are called spike proteins. So this is important for us to identify and just to know that term spike protein, because that's what is discussed when we talk about the vaccine. Okay. So I'd like to show you a video. I thought a video would be the best way for us to all understand and that we're on the same page with regards to vaccination. I will stop the video at some point and then start it again, just so that we don't go through too much irrelevant stuff. Okay, let's go.
Vaccines teach your immune
Ronald, can you hear it and can you see it properly?
Yes, we can.
System how to respond to a threat. And traditionally, there have been 4 ways to do this. The 2 most common types of vaccines work by exposing you to a weakened or dead version of a virus or bacteria. The weakened virus won't make you sick, but it will teach your body how to fight the real thing if you're exposed to it later on. This is how the measles and annual flu vaccines work. Another less common type of vaccine does a similar thing, but uses an inert version of a toxin.
So an inert toxin is just a deactivated or chemically dead organism or chemical. Inert just means not active.
Instead of a virus. The most well-known version of this is probably the tetanus shot. This 4th type of vaccine works a little differently because it only uses a small part of the virus instead of the whole thing. Common examples of this would be the hepatitis B vaccine or the HPV vaccine. Some of the new COVID-19 vaccines also rely on these traditional methods. For example, one COVID-19 vaccine currently in trials uses this 4th method. It only uses one part of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, known as the spike protein. That spike protein is what allows the coronavirus to enter your cells. When injected into your body on its own, it's harmless. But your body will still recognize it as a foreign threat and launch an immune response to fight it off, which is enough to teach your body how to fight the whole virus. But isolating and preparing that spike protein for a vaccine is a process. Researchers first had to modify it, then multiply it a lot, and then assemble the vaccine itself in a lab. In In fact, one thing that all 4 of these types of vaccines have in common is that they all require growing and transporting large amounts of live pathogens in a lab. And that takes a lot of time. The vaccine goes through many steps before it can be approved. But before anything else, it has to be developed. And working with live pathogens makes that process a lot longer. On average, it takes 5 to 10 years for a vaccine to reach FDA approval in the United States. Most COVID-19 vaccines have gotten through this process a lot faster by overlapping the different phases of human trials and starting the manufacturing early. But some vaccines have also found a groundbreaking way to speed up this first section by shifting some of the work out of the lab and into your body. Nearly every function in the human body is carried out by proteins, so our cells are constantly manufacturing them. To do that, they make a single-stranded copy of DNA. That copy is called messenger RNA, or mRNA. Each strand of mRNA holds the information on how to make one type of protein. The cell reads the mRNA, follows the instructions, and makes a protein. And that's where these 2 new types of vaccines come in. They contain instructions. Researchers who developed these new types of vaccines, called mRNA vaccines, started with the genetic sequence of the virus. They also decided to focus on the spike protein we talked about earlier. But instead of assembling and purifying that protein in a lab, they identified the part of the genetic sequence that creates it, and then took a much faster route by synthesizing mRNA and using that as the vaccine, which saved months of time and money. Once inside the body, the cell reads the mRNA and begins to make harmless spike proteins of its own. From there, your body's immune system recognizes the foreign threat and sounds the alarm. This is how the new COVID-19 vaccines from Pfizer and BioNTech and Moderna work. But the main drawback with an mRNA vaccine is that mRNA breaks down very easily. It has to be delivered inside a protective fatty barrier of the SARS-CoV-2 virus.
Oh, sorry.
No, they also design of its own, and Moderna work. But the main drawback with an mRNA vaccine is that mRNA breaks down very easily. It has to be delivered inside a protective fatty barrier and kept ultra cold, which isn't super ideal for a vaccine that needs to reach all areas of the globe. Another effective new to consumer kind of vaccine works similarly, but uses DNA instead of mRNA, which is much more stable. The COVID-19 vaccines from AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson are this type. It does.
Okay, so then they talk a lot more in detail about vaccine and how it's distributed and how it's shared. So I'll go through that with you guys as well. But just so that we're all on the same page, this is how a vaccine works. So if we look at the take-home messages from that video, we know that there's 4 types of vaccines, and we, in the manufacturing of the COVID vaccines, are using the 4th method, which is the recombinant protein method. So what it does is that the vaccine itself does not contain the virus. It contains the message or the instructions for our bodies to make the spike proteins that look like the virus. So then I liked how Dimakato and I were talking about it earlier. She said it's like sending an SMS. So this message then sends a message, this mRNA sends a message to your body to make the spike proteins. And then you have the messages there so that you can refer back to it. So this mRNA is not the virus itself, and it doesn't alter your genetic material, and it doesn't make the virus either. It just makes the spike proteins that look like the top of the spike proteins from the coronavirus. So your body, what it does is it still recognizes the spike proteins that you have made, and it sees it as something new and not normal to your body. So then it creates a response. So very much like soldiers going into battle, you see someone invading you, and you attack them. So it then kills the foreign threat or the the new spike proteins, and then it builds memory cells. So that those memory cells stay in your body and they circulate, so that if ever you are exposed to either the second dose, as in the second vaccine, or you are exposed to the actual virus, then it recognizes those proteins and then it says, hey, I know this wasn't good the last time, so now I need to react quickly. And because it has that memory, it reacts a lot faster and is able to manage that threat a lot quicker. So that memory is what you want from a vaccine, so that when you are faced with the actual virus, it reacts quickly and effectively to destroy the virus. Okay, and then this video did quickly discuss the vaccine approval process, but I would like to discuss that in a bit more detail as we go on, just so that we all understand that no shortcuts were taken in the production of the vaccine. It's just that steps were just done a lot faster, but we'll get to that. Are there any questions at this stage in terms of how the vaccine actually works in our body? Ronald, you'll have to tell me if there are
Yeah.
any hands or
No,
questions.
no hands, but Wayne has unmuted and just put up his hand. Wayne,
Yes,
you can go
Wayne.
ahead.
In terms of the variants and the mutations, does the
Mhm.
spike proteins remain the same?
Yes, we will discuss variants as well. I've got some more information on variants as well. But just to tell you, it's not really the spike that changes, but more the genetic sequence of the virus. So the spikes do stay the same. There is still spikes on the virus. It's just the inside of the virus changes with the variant. But we will discuss the variants as we go on. Okay.
Okay. Before you go ahead, Siviwe, you had your hand up. Are you sure you don't want to ask a question? Okay, just put up
I
your hand.
decided to,
Hi, yeah, we're
I
listening.
decided to drop my hand because he
Okay.
was asking what he wanted to ask.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Okay. We will discuss variants as well. Okay, so just you heard in the video they say that that Pfizer vaccine, because of the mRNA vaccine, also needs to be kept in certain temperature environments. So this is the same with a lot of medications like insulin that needs to be kept in the fridge, or even other vaccines that we use, like measles vaccine also needs to be kept in the fridge. So these guidelines are from the Director General for the Pfizer notice. So when the vaccines were imported into the country, they were frozen. That's how they were imported into the country. Cold chain. So minus 80 to minus 60 degrees Celsius. Then as they begin to use them, they thaw them or defrost them. So these are the situations in which the vaccines are kept in order to maintain what we call a cold chain, so that the vaccine stays stable. Okay, I just wanted to show you this so that that you understand. So if you get the vaccine, the Pfizer one, it might feel a bit colder, or you might see that the sister is taking it out of either the fridge or the cooler box where they're keeping it at the clinics or the vaccination sites. Okay, so side effects. I got a lot of questions about side effects from the vaccine. So I do want to show you another video. I think it's also good, rather than me just talking, that you have a visual idea of what happens in your body. But the thing about side effects is that you almost want to have side effects. The reason that you have side effects is because your body is having a reaction. So your body is reacting to this mRNA and the spike protein that you've produced. So you want to have a reaction so that you know that it's working. Not to say that if you don't have a reaction, it won't work. But for me, if you have at least some reaction, you know that something is happening. So we have seen, and I'm sure Dr. Lorinda can also comment at some stage, but she and I had very different reactions. I had some side effects. She had almost no side effects. So we are seeing that in younger people, the reaction is a lot more pronounced than people who are a little bit, I don't want to say older, but people who are a little bit less young.
You can, Urvi, you can say it.
I
Just
can
say
say
it,
older. Yeah. So even Vuka felt quite fine. So the older people are having less side effects from the vaccine than younger people. Okay, so let's just but what it is that it is your body. Why is this thing not escaping? It's your body having a reaction to the vaccine, and you want your body to react. Okay, this is another video from a medical person in India, but I think it explains it quite nicely. I just don't want to let you see the unnecessary.
Sometimes after vaccination, the process of building immunity can cause symptoms such as fever, muscle pain, fatigue, etc. These symptoms are normal and are a sign that the body is building immunity. So it's very important that you understand the minor side effects of COVID vaccine, and also we will discuss some of the rare but serious complications that can occur. Then we will talk about whether you can get COVID-19 from a COVID-19 vaccine. So without further ado, let's begin. The most common side effects that you can experience after COVID-19 vaccination include pain at the injection site, tiredness, headache, muscle pain, chills, swollen lymph nodes, joint pains, fever, swelling at the injection site, and redness at the injection site. You can also experience some kind of nausea. These are known as a minor or expected side effects of a vaccine, and they can occur not just after COVID vaccine, but in fact after most of the vaccines that you receive. These side effects occur because your body is adapting to the vaccine. You see, vaccines work by introducing a small number of bacteria, virus, or toxin into your body. Because the bacteria, virus.
Okay, so we've already discussed that part. So those are the mild side effects that you can expect. But obviously, I think we also want to know if there are any serious side effects that we can experience. So let's listen to that as well.
Serious adverse effects, while possible, are very rare. Let's take the example of yellow fever.
Okay, so I'm just going to stop here. Yellow fever, they discuss yellow fever and measles as an example. So yellow fever is an illness. It's not endemic to South Africa, but it can, in some countries, you require a yellow fever vaccine before entering and exiting, like if you go to Zanzibar or Tanzania, I think Kenya, and possibly India as well. So that's why they discuss yellow fever. So if you're lost there, don't stress. It's just the way in which they try and explain it to show why, in the same way as these vaccines, why COVID is also the vaccine for COVID is also having the same concepts. But you can ask questions if something is not clear.
That is also caused by a virus. According to WHO, serious side effects occur at a rate of 0.09 to 0.4 cases per 10,000 doses of yellow fever vaccine in populations who haven't been exposed to the virus. By contrast, the serious form of yellow fever is fatal around half the time.
So what this basically says is that if you get yellow fever, chances are that it's very, very fatal. Versus if you take the vaccine, your risk of having a serious effect is a lot less. So if you weigh up the risk of getting the actual illness and getting sick from the illness versus whether you would get sick from the vaccine, chances of you getting very sick from the actual disease, which is yellow fever, is a lot more severe.
On a similar note, the rate of serious allergic reactions is around 1 to 2 cases.
So even with COVID, one of the serious side effects that we can have is severe allergic reaction or anaphylaxis. This is with any medication, any vaccine basically anything and everything you can have an allergic reaction to. But just to put it into perspective, if you compare it to other vaccines and the actual risk of the allergic reaction, then this is what it's trying to explain.
On a similar note, the rate of serious allergic reactions is around 1 to 2 cases per million across all vaccines. Compare that with the death rate of measles, which is around 1 in 500, and for flu, which causes around 200 deaths in UK alone every winter. And it's obvious which is riskier. What we need to understand are the risks and benefits. How many people are dying from yellow fever? How many people are dying from measles? Versus how many died from any serious adverse effects of the vaccine. Now, clearly, adverse effects are tragic for the individual and the family, but they are very rare. And we need to balance this with the risks associated with that of the disease. So, there is a remote chance that COVID-19 vaccine can cause a severe allergic reaction. A severe allergic reaction would usually occur within a few minutes to 1 hour after getting a dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. For this reason, your vaccination provider may ask you to stay at a place where you received your vaccine for monitoring of the vaccination. Signs of a severe allergic reaction can include difficulty in breathing, swelling of your face or throat, a fast heartbeat, a skin rash all over your body, dizziness, and extreme weakness. Now, let's try to answer the golden question, which is, can the COVID vaccine give me COVID-19? The simple answer to this question is a big no. None of the COVID-19 vaccines contain the SARS-CoV-2 virus, so it is not possible that you can contract COVID-19 from the COVID-19 vaccine. So guys, I hope I was...
Okay, good. Any questions on side effects for now?
Yes, Urvi, there is a question in the chat box.
Okay.
Dimagato is asking, will the vaccine affect someone who has asthma and hypertension?
Okay, so we will discuss who can get the vaccination and who can't. But yes, it's actually recommended to take those vaccines, the vaccine in those population groups, simply because the vaccine itself is not likely to cause any problems with those underlying conditions at all. So the vaccine won't cause you to have an asthma attack. It won't raise your blood pressure. It won't do all of those things. So that's why it's not contraindicated in those population groups. However, if you get COVID and you have high blood pressure or you are asthmatic, your chances of developing severe illnesses, severe COVID illness, and worsening of your chronic condition is a lot higher. So the vaccine itself, yes, you can take it if you have those chronic conditions, and it's actually recommended. Any other questions? Ronald?
No, there are no hands. No, nothing in the chat box. You can proceed.
Okay. All right. So you think sorry?
Sorry. Tabang just unmuted. Hi, Tabang.
Hi. So I was asking, what are the side effects of mixing OST and the vaccine, if that's possible?
Yeah, we can discuss that. I can answer that now as well. That's fine. So people, I can actually discuss it now as we discuss people with various underlying medical conditions. So remember, OST is ingested into your body. You swallow it, it goes through your digestive system via your liver, and that's how it's taken out. With the vaccine, it's injected directly into your muscle. It doesn't go via your digestive tract. It's not eliminated via your liver as well. So it's just producing that reaction, which is going to create the spike protein. So if you are drinking OST or if you are drinking any chronic medication, the vaccine is not going to interfere with your medication at all.
Thank you. Answered.
Okay. So the big question were, are these vaccines safe? Especially since we know that vaccines have normally take such a long amount of time, and they were done in such a short space of time for COVID. So I will discuss that in detail, how exactly it happened. But just to say that in people with various medical conditions, so high blood pressure, diabetes, asthma, any lung, liver, or kidney disease, any chronic infections that are stable and controlled, it is safe and effective and also recommended in those persons with underlying medical conditions. And that's also, as the video described, you have to consider the risk versus the benefit. So if you look at the risk of contracting COVID and then the risks of COVID on those persons with underlying effects, definitely they are going to be a lot sicker, more likely to get severe illness. So the vaccine in these populations would actually be protective. So the only people who should consult, or who I would say let's be cautious with for now, is people who are have a very compromised immune system. So for example, people who are quite severely ill and are taking chemotherapy, maybe people with a very immunocompromised HIV system who are really very ill. So people who are not on ARVs, people who really have no immune system left. And then people who've had a history of severe allergic reaction to vaccines. So say, for example, you've had a previous vaccine and you had an allergic reaction to that vaccine, then I would be cautious in that. And it's not because of the spike protein or the mRNA, but there's certain ingredients that are used in vaccines that are put together to make the vaccine stable. So the one ingredient that has been known to show allergic reaction is ethylene glycol, and that's an ingredient in some of the vaccines. So if you've had a previous reaction, allergic reaction to a vaccine, that's when you would say, okay, maybe I should not get this vaccine at this stage. Okay. So pregnancy and breastfeeding. So it's true in that there is not a lot of research specifically on vaccine safety in pregnancy, in a sense that there hasn't been a specific trial looking only at pregnant women and the effects of the vaccine on pregnancy. However, it is definitely true that those who are pregnant are more likely to develop severe illness if they develop COVID, and are more likely to be hospitalized and require ICU admission. So if you have a high risk, if you are pregnant and you have high risk exposure to COVID, and you also have an underlying medical condition, for example, you have pregnancy related diabetes or pregnancy induced high blood pressure, then that causes you to have a high risk pregnancy, but it also can be a risk for severe COVID. So our Department of Health has sent out guidance that we may vaccinate, pregnant women may vaccinate after 14 weeks. So that's after the first trimester. If anyone is pregnant and they would like to vaccinate, or they are considering vaccinate, I would suggest that you discuss it with your gynae and you decide with your gynae whether you want to vaccinate or not. Personally, I think I would vaccinate. I mean, I got the flu vaccine when I was pregnant, so I would vaccinate if it was after 14 weeks. For breastfeeding, it's the same. We haven't had people who've been specifically given the vaccine who are breastfeeding. However, so what happens when you're breastfeeding? Why is breastfeeding so good for babies? It's because you pass on antibodies. So in breastfeeding women, what would happen is that, remember, your body makes the spike protein, it develops an immune system response, you develop memory cells, and you develop antibodies. So it's those antibodies that are passed on to the baby. So the baby also sort of develops some immunity. I think it is definitely safe. The flu vaccine can also be given to babies from 6 months of age. So I would recommend vaccinating if you are breastfeeding. However, if you are not sure, if you are uncomfortable, you could always discuss with the baby's pediatrician, or you could speak to me personally if you want to, if you are unsure. Or you could even wait if you are uncomfortable. This is for pregnancy and for breastfeeding. But especially for pregnancy, the risk of developing severe COVID is high. So if you are, as we are healthcare workers, we have to be very careful. So our risk of getting COVID is higher. So therefore, I would be more concerned if I was pregnant to get COVID. Okay. So then there was also a question about if you can breastfeed, if you can get the vaccine while you are breastfeeding, why are we not yet vaccinating children? So in some countries, they have started vaccinating people over 12, and then in other countries, they have started vaccinating people over 16. Our guidelines are not yet at that stage. We are still only vaccinating people over the age of 18. I think that we are just being more cautious. The reason for that is because all the vaccine trials that were done, as in all the people who did receive the vaccines, were adults. And the reason that adults were prioritized in the trials is because we know that COVID has been affecting adults a lot more than children. So therefore, all the trials were focused on adults and seeing how adults would do with the vaccine. Okay, so people with heart conditions, the guidance is the same. I looked at the American Journal, the American, Journal of Cardiology, to see what their guidance was for people with heart disease. And again, the guidance is the same, is that the vaccine is still highly recommended because your risk of developing severe illness with COVID is high because of because of your pre-existing chronic condition. Okay, let's just stop there for a second.
Can we take a question before the video, or two questions?
Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. Went away now when you, what is it? Okay, a question from Anonymous. When you share and when you go between your sharing, I lose my thing, sorry. So my mom developed blood clotting due to COVID, and she is currently taking blood thinners,
Yes.
warfarin. Is it safe to take the vaccine?
Yes. So I will discuss blood clots and COVID as well, and then I'll answer that question.
Okay. So the other question is also related to blood clots. So we'll ask that when
I've got a separate slide on blood clots.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Cool.
Thanks.
Developing a vaccine is a long road full of checkpoints. Different phases of testing are designed to make sure it is both effective and safe. But with the whole world struggling to contain a pandemic and unprecedented amounts of scientific work taking place, the road to finding the COVID-19 vaccine looks more like this. But first, let's take a look at the usual path. During preclinical trials, the vaccine is tested on animals to determine whether they develop antibodies to the disease-causing germ. If these trials are successful, the candidate vaccine moves on to phase 1 trials in humans, during which the vaccine is given to a small number of healthy adults to assess its safety in humans. The results of every phase are reviewed by independent clinical experts who assess the research team's findings. Sometimes they'll pause the trials to check the results, always making sure the candidate vaccine is safe. The next phase involves testing a larger group of people to find out the appropriate dose, whether it stimulates an immune response, and of course, to assess its safety. Once the results have been checked by the independent expert observers, the candidate vaccine is evaluated among thousands more volunteers. This phase determines whether it is effective against disease. If the answer is yes, the vaccine is independently assessed by regulators for effectiveness, safety, and manufacturing quality. It is also assessed by independent policymakers who determine the best way to use the vaccine. If the assessment meets the regulatory standards, the product can be authorized for use, and the vaccine is then ready for licensing and registration. Once that happens, the approved vaccine can be used in the population. But because of the urgent need for a COVID-19 vaccine, some of the phases can run in parallel, and the research team can submit a request for temporary authorization from national regulatory authorities and an emergency use listing from WHO. This authorization and WHO emergency listing are only given if the vaccine meets strict safety and effectiveness criteria. But the road doesn't stop there. Once the vaccine is in use, it continues to be monitored by health authorities for safety and for effectiveness to ensure the vaccine maintains the highest standards. The race is on to find vaccines for COVID-19, which is why some phases are happening at the same time. But no one is cutting corners. Everyone is subject to the same checks and independent monitoring. So although we'll get the COVID-19 vaccines faster, they'll be as safe as other approved vaccines.
Okay. Okay, so are there any questions on vaccine, chronic conditions, and also about manufacture and safety of vaccines?
No
Ronald,
questions, no
okay.
hands.
Okay, good. We will answer the questions on blood clots, but let's just go to the next slide. So this is where we discuss the variants. So at present, there are 4 variants that we know of. So the alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. So currently what's really affecting us, or what seems to be spreading quickly and also affecting younger people, is the delta variant. So we know the alpha 1 was detected initially in the UK, the beta variant in South Africa, the gamma variant in Brazil, and the delta variant first identified in India. So it's the delta variant at the moment that seems to have overtaken all of our infections over the last 3 months. And it seems to be the most fastest spreading, and it's also affecting the younger population. And it is also seemingly having a few different symptoms. So like younger kids are getting runny nose and cold-like symptoms, which were not typically COVID symptoms that we were looking for previously. And in adults, it's also been shown to be causing headaches, and basically just different symptoms from the other variants. So again, I have a video, like videos. Now, unfortunately, this video doesn't have sound. So I'm going to be the sound. But I couldn't find a nicer video that I liked that explained it better. Okay. So the variant it's the virus, but it has caused some genetic mutation. So let's just explain that. Yeah, no sound again. So if you look,
not video yet.
Oh, am I not screen sharing? Sorry. Okay, are we there?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we look at, sorry, this video doesn't want to play sound. So if you look at the cell, so this, remember this picture of the virus. So the spikes are there, and then inside you have, I showed you that those squiggly lines on the initial picture. So that's the genetic makeup of the virus. And then there are molecules inside which form different combinations, and that's the genetic, what we call a genetic sequence. So all of our, inside our bodies, we have cells, and all the cells have a genetic code. So if you think of this code, it's like a bicycle lock, and each lock has 4 options, and then you can turn it. So, but now imagine this in your cells or in the virus, it's like 30,000 of those different sequences and inside the virus itself. So that's how the sequence of the virus works. Okay. So every time the virus spreads, it replicates in your body. So say you get the virus, then it enters your cell, and then inside a cell, it replicates and then it spreads. So every time as it's spreading in your body and amongst each other, it copies that sequence because that's the virus sequence. So sometimes what happens, when it copies, it makes a mistake because there's so much information and so much it can. So it's like a mutation. So most of the time, these tiny variations, they don't really change how the virus works. So the virus continues. But sometimes the virus then makes a combination that doesn't work. So it can either make a combination that makes the virus weaker, which we don't usually know about because these weaker strains, they will tend to die out because they are weak. But sometimes it makes combinations or variations that are a little bit stronger. So when it's stronger, what it does is, you see those spikes, they are still there, but they do change a little bit. So the genetic sequence changes a bit, so it changes the inside. And the spikes are there, but they may have changed a little bit, but they are definitely still there. And the change will then make it a little bit different in that it might transmit a bit differently, a little bit faster, or it might cause different effects in people, or it affects different age groups. So this is how the variants work. So these variants now, that's why we're seeing a difference in the transmission and how people are being affected with these variants. So as the stronger variant would then thrive because it's stronger and it spreads faster, and that's how the variants work. Okay, so currently the vaccines, in most cases, they should work against new variants. Now the thing is, nothing is 100%. So I'm not gonna say to you, yes, definitely 100% it will protect against all variants. As we have said, these vaccines were created, they are new. COVID itself is new, so everything is still evolving. So as we go on, the vaccine technology, as well as the effects of the people who are vaccinated, will be studied as well to see that what is actually happening in them. So they should work, or they should at least have some immunity. So even though the protein may look different, it will still have some effect against those variants. So not to say, well, either way, it can't protect you 100%, but it will definitely provide some sort of protection, either against severe disease or against you spreading the virus easily. So that's how the vaccine will work. So as people get the vaccine, if they do become COVID positive, they are asked to please contact the vaccine companies so that they can study the specimens to see what has happened. So they can look at the proteins, they can look at the genetic sequence, and then they can identify how to improve their vaccine if it needs to happen. Okay, Wayne, did that answer your question on the variant?
Yeah, and you answered the question about the response of the vaccines to the variants as well. Thank you, Urvi.
Okay. Any other questions on the variants?
No hands, no chats. No
Okay,
posts
good.
in the chat.
Thank you. Okay. So, question, can you get COVID after getting the vaccine? And so we know about the variants. So we know, yes, you can, but it's not only that. Remember, your immunity develops over time. So if I get the vaccine tomorrow, or today, doesn't mean if I'm exposed tomorrow, I'm immune. It doesn't happen that easily or that quickly. So your body has to develop or build that response. So the spike proteins, the side effects, the immunity, the B cells, all of that takes time. And with some of the vaccines, you require 2 doses to develop full immunity. So even if you need 2 doses, the Pfizer vaccine has shown to have up to 85% efficacy even in a single dose. And most of the transmissions with Pfizer has been shown that it occurs within the first 10 days after the vaccination. So you were exposed very soon after getting the vaccination. So that was before your body could produce enough antibodies to fight off the infection. And then with the second dose, up to the first week, so after the first week, so protection from the first dose can go up to 91%, where the protection from full vaccination ranges from 74 to 97%. Remember, you will never get 100%, for anything, not with contraception, not with vaccination. So as high as possible as we can get, is probably 99.999%. But for these vaccines, they are showing up to 97% protection from the virus. Okay, so if you can still get the virus, why should you then get the vaccine? What difference does it make? So, if you do get the virus, you will definitely have less severe illness. So, it seems that most people who receive that Johnson vaccine, if they did contract COVID, then it seems that they had very mild illness, or they were largely asymptomatic. People who are found to have severe COVID post vaccination are generally people who've had underlying chronic conditions or people who are already high risk for COVID related illness and then they developed severe illness. But what is more important, or not more important, but what is extremely important, say you are young and fit and healthy, and even if you didn't get the vaccine, you may only have had mild illness. But if you get the vaccine, you also reduce transmission. So therefore, you are less likely to spread it to others and infect others. And while your others at your site or your colleagues may also be young, they may also be living with older people, people with comorbidities, people who cannot get the vaccine at this stage. And so they may then spread it to their loved ones at home and cause, you may then inadvertently or not meaning to, but you may end up creating a situation where you've exposed people who live with vulnerable people and then you cause them to have severe illness. So the recommendation currently from the Department of Health is that if you have tested COVID positive, that you should wait 30 days from the date of your positive test before you can get the vaccine. Okay, any questions about this?
No questions.
Okay, great. So let's just look at what's been happening in the world and how many people have been vaccinated to date. So as of yesterday, there have been 2,915,585,482 vaccine doses that have been administered all around the world. There's a very nice, you'll see my references are all here at the bottom. So I will share this presentation as well. So you can either go and look at those full videos or also check the full articles of the references. But what's interesting to note is that in the US, they've fully vaccinated 155 million people, fully vaccinated, which means 2 doses. So they've vaccinated South Africa 3 times, basically, if you look at those numbers. And that's only just under 50% of their population. So they're still vaccinating, but they've started vaccinating, I think, early this year, and they've already done half their population, and half their population is 3 times the size of ours. So that's quite impressive. In the UK, they've done 32 million they've got 32 million fully vaccinated people, which is 49% of their population. And in South Africa, unfortunately, we've only got 480,000 people who've been fully vaccinated, which is only 0.8% of our population. So we do have a long while to go. Just interestingly, those places that are fully vaccinated, like in New York, they've reached 70% vaccination, and they've also started opening places. People who can show that they've been vaccinated don't need to wear a mask. We haven't changed our mask policy yet, but I don't know. My husband tells me that all the European football leagues are open, and stadiums are open, and Formula One races, the stadiums are open for people who are vaccinated. So, and they haven't had outbreaks after having those events, which generally would have been considered super spreader events, but they haven't had any massive outbreaks since these places have fully vaccinated their citizens. Okay, any questions on this slide before I move? Okay.
No questions.
Siviwe
just put up his hand.
Yes, Siviwe.
No, I was so surprised to see that, okay, in Champions League, the Euro, that
Yes.
people are attending the games.
Yes.
So now that you mentioned this, because I was so surprised that, okay, people are attending the games now. Why here in South Africa we can't attend? What's going on? Because we also have the vaccine just like them.
But it's the amount of people that have been vaccinated, and they check people's vaccination status before they allow them in. I think it's the Euro thing that's happening now, the European like the European World Cup or something. But yeah, the stadiums are completely back to normal.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so important question. Has anyone died from the vaccine? I mean, we know people have died from COVID, but let's discuss, has anyone died from the vaccine itself? So out of that large number of people that I mentioned who were vaccinated, there were 3 cases where there were clots that were suspected to have a role in the death, which makes it that 0.00000, that's 8 zeros, 103% chance. So basically what that stat says is that your risk of being struck by lightning is higher than you dying from the COVID vaccine. Okay, and in South Africa, of all those that have been vaccinated, we've not had a vaccine death. Questions?
Do you think in the future there will be a yearly COVID vaccine?
So I think we don't know how long the vaccine will last in us and how long the immunity will last in us. But I think at the moment, Singapore, we can only learn from other countries' examples and see where. So in Singapore, what they're doing is they are treating, because so many people have been vaccinated, like a flu, where flu shots are annually recommended, that once this is eradicated, I don't think it will be annual. Remember, the flu has about 500 strains. So there's 500 different strains, or even more, maybe 5,000. So every year, the flu vaccine, when it's developed based on the previous year's strain. So with COVID, obviously we don't know how many variants there will be. But like, for example, measles, once the vaccine was developed, then the vaccination was fine. Even hepatitis has many different subtypes, but there's one vaccine. So I don't know if there will be annual COVID vaccinations. There might be while the disease is still prevalent and still circulating in our population. But I think remember, if everybody is vaccinated, the disease or the virus has nowhere to go, and it can't survive outside the human body. So then it will just die. So if the virus dies, then I don't think we will need to have annual vaccinations. But this is just my opinion. Okay.
Okay, thanks. I just want to ask, are you going to talk more on clots, or was this the slide?
No, there's more.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so does the vaccine cause blood clots? So there were two vaccines, the AstraZeneca, which we haven't used, and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So the Johnson & Johnson one is the one that was used in the first phase of the vaccine rollout, that reported extremely rare blood clots that were connected to these two vaccines. So with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, there were six cases of vaccine out of 6.8 million doses, and it was in the United States. So all the cases of clots were reported in the US, and there were six of them. So that's 0.00009% of all the cases. So that is the vaccine risk for clots. So after that, there was a temporary pause on the Johnson vaccines to see what happens if anybody else reports more clots, or is this a side effect that we need to take more seriously. And after they reviewed all the available data, then it was only those 6 cases that were reported, and the vaccine's benefits would still outweigh its potential risks. However, what I can say is that, so someone has said that their mom developed clots after COVID. And so there's more and more data showing that COVID actually is more likely to cause clots. Actually, my sister-in-law's sister has COVID, and she developed clots as well. And so she's also on blood thinners. So it's more likely that you will get clots from COVID rather than from the vaccine. The other type of clot that is quite serious and it can cause stroke is also a brain clot. So the risk of developing a brain clot is 10 times higher in people with COVID than those receiving the vaccine. Now, in terms of if you've had COVID and if you've had the clot, should you get the vaccine? I would say yes. But if someone is on warfarin, remember when you get warfarin, then you do tend to bleed. I think that if she's getting warfarin, usually they don't, you see, it will depend. Is the warfarin supposed to be lifelong? Normally warfarin is about 6 months. So if it's been close to that period, you could just wait till the end of that warfarin period. Or if the warfarin is going to be lifelong, I would say that they should still go for the vaccine, because remember, you can still get COVID again. So in someone who's had a blood clot, we know that now they are predisposed to getting COVID blood clots. If they happen to get COVID again, then their chances of developing even more severe blood clots and even other complications are a lot higher. So I think it would depend on, remember, you check your INR with warfarin. You would have to do all those investigations, make sure everything is stable. And then after that, you would probably still be able to take the vaccine. Just got a notification of a hand.
Yeah. So it's 6 months.
Okay, 6 months.
Yeah, Anonymous said it's 6 months.
And how long has it been so far?
Okay, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Geleto's hand is up. What's your question, Geleto?
I want to ask, I'm on Ecotrin for, I think it's a blood thinner and it's lifelong. So
yeah.
for me,
Ecotrin
can I take the vaccine?
Yes, Ecotrin is aspirin. It's cardiac aspirin, and I think it's only 75 milligrams. So it's low dose, and it should be fine. Okay, so it's really fine.
Okay,
it's
not
as Ecotrin is just low dose aspirin.
Okay, thank you, Doc.
Okay.
Mom has been on for 5 months.
Yeah, so 5 months, 6 months is almost over. I would say just wait for the 6 months to be over, and then she can get the vaccine.
Thanks.
Okay. Any more questions on blood clots?
Maybe just to make sure that this question is answered, I'm just quickly going to read it. A patient over 60 years that had pulmonary embolism and had treatment a few years ago, is it safe to get the vaccine with previous cases where blood clots were formed? Yeah, I think that's the question.
Yes. Also, I just want to remind everyone that the vaccine that was implicated in blood clots is Johnson & Johnson. So the vaccines that we are currently using in this phase or this rollout is Pfizer. So the Pfizer vaccine hasn't been implicated in any blood clots. So yes, because it's now I would feel even more comfortable saying yes, you can get it, simply because Pfizer has not shown any side effects of blood clots.
Okay, thanks. And then maybe this question as well, can the vaccine affect the eyes at all? Eyesight?
No. It hasn't been reported. No visual disturbances have been reported as a side effect.
Okay, thanks. That's all for now.
Okay, so does the vaccine cause infertility? So I think on social media there was something going around that the vaccine can cause infertility. However, there is no evidence that any of the vaccines may cause infertility. And there's actually no theory as to how it would cause female infertility either. So interestingly, during the Pfizer vaccine test, there were 23 female volunteers who actually became pregnant after getting the vaccine. And while this is not a large enough sample to say that it doesn't affect infertility, but what we can say is that there is no evidence to show that it does cause infertility. And we know of 23 women in the study who did become pregnant. There was one woman who did have a pregnancy loss, but she didn't even receive the vaccine. She had received a placebo. In men, I thought it's also important to include men in the fertility question. So also no evidence that the vaccine can cause infertility. However, interestingly, COVID itself, the virus or COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID, can have an effect on testicular function, on sperm production, and male fertility. So there's also been reports of men with testicular or scrotal pain after getting COVID. So it's not the vaccine that can cause fertility or male reproductive problems, but actually COVID itself. Okay, questions on fertility?
No questions.
All right, so what are the possible long-term effects of the vaccine? So this was a difficult question to answer because obviously I can't tell you what will happen in 5 years or 10 years because it hasn't happened yet. But what we can look at is previous vaccines and what happened to the history of previous vaccines. And generally, when new vaccines are released, the side effects generally show up within 2 months. So if we look at all of our vaccinations, so even like with our polio vaccine, remember the oral polio drops that we get is also a vaccine. So generally it comes, whatever happens is going to happen within the first 2 months. And then does the vaccine shorten your lifespan? There's no evidence that this vaccine will cause early death or harm. So there's no also possible theory to think as to why they would shorten your lifespan, or also to look at possible long-term effects, like what if scientists or if we as researchers had to look at what could the possible long-term effects of the vaccine be. There's no theory that we can say that yes, it can be this. But we definitely do know that there are long-term effects of COVID that we are seeing because the virus has been around for now 18 months. So we are seeing people who are struggling even a year after having COVID. So those ones we can say we know, but there haven't yet been any other theories or possibilities of any long-term effects of the vaccine. Okay. Any other question on this?
There's a question about persons with. Oh, can a COVID-19 infected person become crippled or disabled?
So what COVID-19 can do is it can give you blood clots that cause a stroke. And then if you have a stroke, then you can have disabilities or you can have loss of function of the one side of your body. So not the virus itself, but what the virus can do. So if, for example, you have a stroke secondary to to COVID, then you can become paralyzed or lose function on half of your body, etc. I hope that answers that.
Wayne's mic is unmuted.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something?
Maybe it's a stupid question, or maybe already answered it, Urvi. So you spoke about earlier about medication that you take orally and so on that won't the vaccine and the medication do not talk to each other. But what about a active injecting user?
Okay.
Is that an issue?
Well, no, it's not a stupid question, A. And B, no, it has no effect. I mean, diabetics who use insulin are also getting the vaccine with no effect. Remember, medications work on certain things. So even if you are a heroin user, then the heroin is working on your mu receptors in your body. That's where the heroin goes. It's not interested in anything else. Insulin is working on your beta and delta cells. So the vaccine is only interested in that part of your body that's the muscles to make the spike protein. It's not interested in anything else. It's not doing anything else anywhere else. And likewise, the medication that works on certain receptors, like if you smoke cannabis, it goes to the cannabis receptors. If you smoke heroin, it goes to the mu receptors. If you take insulin, so they're not really affecting each other at all when they're in the body. Like if you eat something and or if you digest it, it goes through the whole process. So if you take oral medication, then it goes through your process. It first has to be digested, it has to be absorbed, and then it has to be taken out by your liver and kidneys, or by your lungs. So the processes are very different, and what the vaccines and drugs target are also very different. So there really should not be any effect on people who are using any form of injectable or otherwise any medication. Okay.
Okay, I have a question. Yeah, and I should have asked it earlier. I'm not sure if you've answered this question. If somebody, because you said if you've tested positive for COVID, you should wait 30 days before you get the vaccine. What if what will happen if you're asymptomatic and you go there to go get your vaccine and you are COVID positive? What will happen to you?
Probably nothing, hey? You probably won't have a very good response to the vaccine because you've just had it. So it will be almost like a wasted vaccine because your body will be like, hey, but you were just here. So,
Okay.
Out. So, so the in the United States or in other countries, they are saying that you can get the vaccine as soon as you feel well enough and you are no longer infectious. So after your 14 days, you can actually go and get your vaccine if you feel well enough to go. So if you have active infection, it would just mean that you've got those spike proteins, you've got that virus in your body's already creating a system. Now you've injected the message to make more spike protein. Now the body's like, but I know you. So I think it would just be a wasted vaccine. Okay. Can I move on?
Yes, you can move on. Thanks.
Okay. So will there be any pre and post vaccine counseling? So not really pre and post vaccine counseling. I'm hoping that this is a bit of your pre-vaccine counseling. But what will happen? I think let's discuss the vaccination steps. What will happen if you decide to get vaccinated? So you will get your message. You will go to whichever site you will be vaccinated at, and then the nurse or the vaccinator will confirm your information, confirm your registration, all of that. Then they will explain what vaccine you are getting, what it is for, and then discuss any potential side effects. They'll tell you where they're going to inject, how they're going to inject. Then you will give consent. Everything is electronic, so you're not going to be signing anything. So everything is done electronically. That's how we are able to keep track so well of the amounts of vaccinations done, because everything is electronic. So you will give consent. Sorry, phone is ringing. You will give consent. Then they'll clean your arm. Generally, you prefer to do it on your, I should have said non-dominant arm and not left arm, but it's your non-dominant arm, because remember, one of the side effects can be painful arm. So prefer to do it on the arm that you are not using to write and stuff. Then you are monitored for approximately 15 to 20 minutes. There's like a waiting area. Oh gosh. There's like a waiting area where you are monitored. And then if there are any allergic reactions, then there's emergency equipment, etc., on standby to manage any of that. Okay. Okay. So I got asked, what do you think is the worst case scenario that could happen? So anaphylaxis, but I think beyond that, the worst thing that could happen is that you also get COVID. This is not an answer I can give scientifically, but in my opinion, the worst case, or what's the worst thing that could happen, is either you have an allergic reaction to COVID, or you get the vaccine, everything is fine, and you still get COVID. Beyond that, I can't give you scientific evidence of worst case scenarios, but I think that these would be one of the bad things that happen. Okay, any last questions?
There's a hand from Tendai. Tendai? Please unmute.
Yes, I just want to know, maybe I'm just taking you back again. What is the difference between the person who took the vaccine and the person who had COVID and recovered? Because if I heard you right, you said if somebody had the vaccine, we develop some B cells, which are the antibodies which can fight another episode of vaccine, another episode of COVID if you have it again. Isn't it the same if somebody has COVID-19 now? Does that person develop the B cells already?
Okay, so the reason that you still recommended to get the vaccine after having COVID is because we don't know how long the immunity is going to last from the COVID. So generally they think around 3 months, but we have had people, there's actually a doctor at TDH, at Kalafong, before the vaccine, he got COVID 3 times. And the last time he got really sick. So if you get COVID, it doesn't guarantee you long-term protection against the virus. So the vaccine is seeming to, and it doesn't also reduce the severity. The vaccine seems to protect you for a longer time. That's what we think. And also to reduce the severity if you do happen to get it.
Okay.
Does that answer you?
Yeah, I think.
Does that answer you?
Yes, I think I think I'm answered, but still, I was just concerned.
If you get COVID, yeah. So if you get COVID, yes, you do have some immunity, but that immunity may not last, and also you can still get the same COVID again a few months later. So that's the reason, because you can still get it again. Okay. And you might not get it less severe. You might get it more severe. And you will also still spread it as fast as you would have spread it if you didn't have it before. Whereas with the vaccine, it has shown that you're less likely to infect other people, and you're less likely to get severe illness.
Okay, I get it.
Okay.
Donnie's hand is up.
Thanks, Ronald. I just want to ask, in the earlier slides where you talked about the cold chain, what is the effect if the cold chain is broken while it was transported to the sites? Is there any severe side effect or when you get the vaccine or not?
So if the cold chain is broken, it just means that the vaccine won't be stable and it will just probably not be as effective. You won't get sick from it, you just have a less, it will just work less better. You know, it will just not be as effective.
Okay, but I mean, the vaccine will still, with time, become better, or is it does it mean that vaccine is not that good then?
Yeah, it does mean that. So that's why that's why cold chain does need to be maintained, because once it's broken, the vaccine stability reduces and then it doesn't work as well as it should.
Okay, and there's no way where you can manage that you know this site is that they didn't broke the cold chain. I mean, there's no way you can monitor that.
No, unfortunately not. but they have to comply with strict standards, all vaccinators. So wherever they're keeping the vaccines, they're recording temperatures, they have to keep thermometers even in the cooler boxes. It's all quite well regulated and quite strict that they have to monitor those things.
Okay, so it's purely we need to trust them.
Yes.
Okay.
The same way you trust them when you get your insulin.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing unless I need to go back to any of the slides. Ronald, are there any more questions?
No, nothing at the moment.
Can I ask about a question about the COVID compliance protocols? I know it's not
Compliance protocols in terms of?
So
coaching.
everywhere, yeah. So everywhere we go, they test your temperature and fill in these forms. I mean, how effective is that really?
So I personally think the temperature is not that effective because a lot of people don't have fever from COVID, but it is an objective way to measure. So if someone does have a fever, then you won't let them in or let them be around. But not having a temperature is not going to exclude you from having it, if that makes sense. And even the symptoms, because like I said, the variants are also changing and we are seeing a little bit of different side effects. Chances are you will miss one or two people, even at the shops everywhere. That's why we are in this wave, because people are around. I mean, I think even at our sites, we have people who are positive, and I think they didn't think it was COVID. They thought, it's just maybe a cold or a this or a that. And then it turned out to be COVID, and I think they were surprised. So yeah, it is a problem.
Donnie has his hand up. Tendai, is that a new hand? Okay, Donnie, you can ask.
Yeah, sorry, my last question. I just want to know, will this recording be available for sharing with our nearest families, or is it not?
No, you're welcome to share it. It's fine. I don't mind.
Okay.
I have to just see it I'm recording to the cloud, so I'm sure the system will send me a message of how to access it. Lorinda, it should be fine, hey, to share with everyone. I think it should be.
Sorry, I've been looking for my unmute. Yeah, of course. If you're happy with it, of course, Urvi.
That's fine. Sorry, guys.
Yeah,
Somebody is trying to phone me for like the 10th time. Can just give me 1 second.
I can maybe just in the meantime, Tendai, I thought it was a really good question. I was waiting for that question with regards to, but why do you need a vaccine versus natural immunity that's been developed? Is Tendai still on?
Yeah, he's still here.
Okay. And I'm not an expert at all, but just out of interest, I looked for a sort of in the BMJ, what one person said, one doctor, it's how does it work? Natural immunity compare with vaccine induced. And basically what this person said as a professor of immunology is that most people's immune system tend to respond in very different ways to natural infection. So if you had COVID, you wouldn't know what your response are. Was it good? Was it bad? And like Urvi referred to, the one person got it 3 times and even worse than last time, where in comparison, the immune response after vaccination is much more homogeneous. And adding that most people generally have a really good response after vaccination. So that is a sort of a simple answer to a complex question. Tendai, I
Yes.
think there was a lot of uncertainty in you, but at least you know with a vaccine there's a response, and you don't really know what your response was in a lot of factors determining your B cells and your T cells, to get now a little bit more technical, and you don't really know what your response was. So it's worth it just to get a vaccine to be more sure of a response.
Yes, I understand. I get it.
Okay.
Because I was, truly speaking, I was just concerned.
I was waiting for that question. I was waiting for it. Well done.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Over to you, Ronald.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
Okay, Urvi. Urvi, I just quickly quoted something from the BMJ. I said, I'm not the expert, but I was waiting for a person to ask the question about the natural immunity versus the induced, vaccine-induced immunity. And where in the BMJ, where Professor in immunology referred to the fact that each person differs in their level of response, and you would never know what yours is. But with the vaccine, it's more homogeneous. So most people respond to the vaccines and develop an immune response.
Okay. Okay. I also would like some feedback. I don't know if you were discussing it. I hope I covered everything, and I hope it was fine for everyone. If you can think of anything that I could have improved on, please let me know as well. I would appreciate the feedback from anyone and everyone.
It was clear,
Yeah.
and I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Urvi.
Pleasure. I think my husband also learned something while I was trying to do this.
It was a great presentation. Thanks, Urvi.
Okay, great.